Um, as ever, we've got a great session coming up. We love to have lots of variety in all of our webinars. So today we're looking at recruitment and social enterprise. And I'm really delighted to welcome Jonathan Black, Director of the Oxford University Career Service and co-founder of Skylark Works. So Jonathan's going to be kind of taking us through our topic today, and his colleague Kate is joining us as well, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And yeah, any questions you've got. This is really about how do we recruit good candidates, tips and advice. And I think hopefully will be a really useful, practical session. So as ever, I would encourage you, use the chat function, use the Q&A. The more you ask, the more you'll get out of today's webinar. We will, as ever, come to the Q&A at the end. But for now, I know you haven't tuned in to listen to me and my croaky voice, so I will hand over directly to Jonathan, and thank you for joining us for today's session.
Thanks very much, Naomi. It's great to be here, and I wish I was up there, because from what we were hearing earlier, the weather's much better than it is here in Oxford, which is rather grey and high overcast. Never mind, I'm going to share the screen. Let's see if we can get this to work. That's sharing that, so it's all a bit, there we are. Right, so Naomi, can you see those okay?
All coming through great.
Perfect. Right, so thank you. I've got a few slides to zip through to illustrate the talk. As Naomi said, I've been at the Career Service for about 13, 14 years now. And last year with Katie and one other person, we co-founded Skylark, which is a University of Oxford spin-out as well. So there is a connection. This is about recruitment. Obviously, we see a great number of students, we talk to a great number of employers, and this has been gleaned from all of that experience, I suppose, and also the way that we recruit. So what I want to cover today is what are you as employers looking for? What are they? And particularly, I've looked at graduate students. What are they looking for? Run through the different ways to recruit, and then give you the example of how we do what I think, even for the university, is a pretty thorough, open and fair process. So to me, and I talk to students about this, there's really only one question you've got, which is, do I want to work with them? And of course, you can't just ask that directly. We ask all sorts of other questions. Specifically, we ask, have you got the relevant technical skills? And they won't be sitting in front of you unless on paper they do have the relevant skills, which could be chemistry, it could be accountancy, it could be HR functions or company secretarial qualifications, but generally the technical skills you can see on paper. And then there are three things I think we all look for, which is, do these people take responsibility? You ask them to do something and they do it the first time. You don't have to keep asking. They take responsibility for actions. Secondly, do they achieve things? So do they get stuff done? And then finally, the smiley face. Are they nice to have around? I don't know how else to portray this, but do they have a positive attitude? By which we mean the words in the bottom bullet point there. Are they honest? Are they open? Are they tolerant? Do they challenge appropriately? Are they interested and motivated? And are they curious about what we get up to? With that mantra at the end that we hire for attitude and train for skill. So if they can't write the perfect email in a test you give them, or they haven't got particular exact skills, we can always train up skills, but you can't, I think, after the age of about 20, 25, you can't really change people's attitude. And the attitudes we're all looking for is, are they honest and open and tolerant? Those are the sort of people that I suspect you all look for, that we look for. I'm sure there are other industries where they're probably not as bothered with some of those points, but I think we certainly are. So do they take responsibility? Do they achieve things? And are they nice to have around? And by the way, for those of you who are ever thinking of going off to get another job, that's what I would suggest you have in a CV to demonstrate that you have done those things. We're not at all interested in process. Back in earlier this year, in the spring, we asked students, what are they looking for in an ideal job? We've asked this every year, actually. I asked it a year before, and I wanted to see if the pandemic had changed what people were looking for. And this is on a scale of 1 to 5. So number 1 is consistently, and I've asked this, 5 years ago as well, intellectual challenge. So if you want to attract the best, you're going to provide them with an intellectually challenging role. That doesn't mean it's going to be complex mathematical equations to solve or chemical reactions to deal with. It's just intellectually challenging. They talk about having a good work-life balance. So they're going to be as active out of work as they are in work. They're going to be involved and engaged in perhaps in volunteering or in things in society. We don't, as we say to the students, we don't really mind what you get up to. It could be music or drama or the church or children's clubs or what have you, but we're looking for engagement. And then number 3, we'll all be delighted to know, is they want a cause that promotes positive social change. This has risen during the pandemic from about number 5 to their number 3, that's what they're looking for. So again, you're in a good place probably with all your organizations to demonstrate that and to play to those. High job security, again, I think that's a pandemic related. That wasn't quite as high before. I suspect it might be the influence of parents as well. But note that pay is number 5 in that list. It is not top of the list. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's deeply involved in government and saying, the mistake government makes is to say, oh, we're losing lots of GPs or we're losing lots of teachers, let's pay them more. Pay, as we know, is a hygiene factor. It is not a motivator to get you out of bed in the morning and come to work. What motivates you is the things above that line. Geographic location has become less important. I think particularly with the pandemic, we've demonstrated we don't need to be commuting 5 days a week to be effective. Training program, and I'm really pleased to see that things like family friendly and partners plans are right down the bottom. Family friendly is more about, I don't want to have a family now, but when I do, I want my employer to be friendly. And I think everyone realizes they are friendly now in terms of maternity and paternity leave and so on. So that's become very right down the bottom at number 9 or 10. So the message is to you when you're trying to recruit, not just graduates, but I think that whole Generation Z and even millennials are saying, I want the challenge, I want work-life balance, I want people I like working with, and I want to promote positive social action. So if you can appeal to those, you'll get a great field. And of course, how you recruit, you can pick on what we've just talked about there. It sends a message to your potential recruits about the culture of your organization. Are you also open, innovative, welcoming challenge, giving people their head to be able to do different things? What are your values? And then we talk about how are you going to find these people? And we've got some options. You could look to recruit internally only. Sometimes if you're a big enough organization, that's probably a good place to start. I don't think you get the complete best field, but it might be good enough. One mustn't overlook the wonderful nepotism. I wouldn't for 1 second suggest you do this, but as we all know, it's out there, particularly in small family firms. There's the direct approach where you, well, in the old days, you tap someone on the shoulder and say, have you ever thought about coming to work over here? And then obviously there's the open solicitation where we're as open as we can be. We advertise widely because we truly want to get the best field of candidates. So let's talk about the process as we go through. I'm going to pause for a second in case there are any questions in the chat we want to pick up. Naomi or Katie, are there any things we should stop and pick up now?
I can't see anything as yet, Jonathan. People tend to put stuff in towards the end, I think, just because they're used to coming to our sessions this way. But
okay,
I've already got a bank of questions. I've got loads to ask you, so don't worry.
all right, no worries. Okay, okay, so here's the process as I would go through for an overall as open as we can process with the best field. Starting at the bottom left, identify the posts and define the criteria. I'm going to break each of these down. Advertise widely and respond to inquiries, shortlist versus the criteria that we have set, run an assessment centre, it's a grand term for however you want to do that, and then get the team input to decide, offer a point, and then obviously celebrate what you've done. So let's take each of those as a way of how we appoint. Back on my screen. So warm. This is around describing the role. Remember what I said about the culture that we're going to demonstrate. We're offering intellectual challenge and a work-life balance, a warm team to work with. You'll be given the opportunity to, if you have ideas, you'll get to do them. Whenever I'm recruiting and someone said, and we say, have you got any questions? And they say, well, if I have an idea, will I be able to do it? And I say, yes, you will. But by the way, you will. We're not having people who say someone should do something about this. If you have an idea, that's great. We'll find money or time or help or support. But if you've got an idea, the best person to do it would be you. So second point, describe the tasks that the people are going to do, the reporting lines, who's going to report to them, if anybody, and where it is. So pretty standard basic stuff. Third point, the essential criteria for the job, and I please would have no more than 5. I've seen job descriptions where they go on for about 15 or 20, and it's that they start to list things that are just part of normal day-to-day work, but they're not getting at the essential criteria of what you're looking for. And you're really after behaviors and attitudes about the criteria of how people have behaved. And you may have some desirable criteria around languages or international experience or something like that. But be really clear what they are, because the ideal candidate will address each of those when they write back to you in their application about how they meet those criteria. In a job ad, I would always invite the candidates to get in touch. If it's appropriate and we get out of the pandemic and you want people in your offices and you have offices, you could invite them to come and visit and to make a note of who has actually got in touch, because they are people who are, again, going a little bit extra to find out more about it. Give them a name that they can call, whether it's reception or somebody, just to ask any questions they may have. Again, we're trying to be warm and open. Be reasonably clear about the compensation package so that people don't have to ask those questions. The training you offer, whether it's on the job or it's formal training or support for training, time off in lieu, holidays, etc., etc. And again, set your dates. Obviously, the deadline for application. Be aware if you're trying to appoint people from outside the UK, whether you have to advertise for at least 4 weeks. You know, Home Office guidelines are changing all the time, but whatever that deadline is. I would also say what date or at least what week the interviews are going to be in. So again, people can mark the diaries and be available and explain if there are going to be multiple rounds. Now, you may want to hold back on that because you may, if you have a dead heat in your first round of assessment, you need the right to be able to call people back, but you may not need it. So I'd be reasonably vague about that. But your first interview list, I would give a date. And then we need to push it out widely. Ask all your staff to promote it through their own social media channels. Use your personal networks. There's nothing like, you know, come and be a colleague with me. I was amazed, actually. We're advertising for a departmental administrator at the moment because my current one is moving to Edinburgh to work at the University of Edinburgh in a promotion, which is great. So I posted the job yesterday and got 650 views already, which is quite high. Put it on your own website, ask supporters and friends, and if relevant, you could have a statement like that at the end. If you truly are seeking, or you want to be more open around diversity, then you could say, you know, we really welcome applications from whichever it is the group that you feel is underrepresented. You don't have to have that, of course, but sometimes just that little extra bit might help. And then we shortlist. So this is how we would do it. We're a group of 35, 40 people, but I'd have a small committee, 3 or 4 people, and this is where the essential criteria come in. You'll have a grid of each criteria listed along the top and each candidate down the left-hand side, and a spreadsheet. And then for real equality, we get each member of that small committee to assess each application all on their own without consulting anybody else. So they sit there on their own and they assess each criterion, meets, partially meets, don't know, haven't not enough information, or just doesn't meet. And then we're looking for an overall mark for each candidate. Shortlist, maybe, or no. Lots of question marks. Question marks are okay. I mean, you might not have enough information, or you might just be a bit unclear. Having done that, the shortlisting committee then meets, and you go through, I tend to go through just line in the order they've been printed, which often is alphabetical, or sometimes I've done it reverse alphabetical, so we don't completely sway it for the B's and the C's. And at the start of the meeting, you might say, look, how many people do we want to shortlist? Maybe we want to interview 6, so we should shortlist 7 to allow for somebody to drop out. But we're only going to shortlist the people who meet the criteria. If they don't meet it, we're not going to do it. And then we'll go through them. And if there are 3 people in a committee, we tend to have a first pass that says, if everybody says yes, they're in the middle of the table, we're definitely keeping them in. If everybody says no, they're definitely out. And then, of course, as usual, the discussion is around the question marks. So you would normally end up with maybe 3 or 4 who are all yeses, and then a bunch of people who are 2 yeses and a no, or 2 yeses and a maybe, and so on. I mean, we're not completely rigid about this. You'll then have a discussion and say, if you really rate this candidate, then fight for them and make your case. And people will change their mind in the discussion, say, oh yeah, I hadn't picked that up from their letter. Okay, that's fine, let's put them in. So you'll end up with your list of 5 or 6 that you have agreed. And then the last point there, we tend to retain, well, we do retain all the notes, everything that's been written for 6 months. We haven't ever had anybody come back, but you never know. And actually the notes are really helpful for anyone who does write in within a day or 2 to say, oh, why didn't I get shortlisted? Because as you'd expect, we want to be helpful to people and not just say, sorry, you didn't meet the criteria. We'd like to give a bit more help than that so that people can go away feeling good, so that they can learn, you didn't address the criteria, or we felt you didn't hit the criteria for X and Y. We don't want to get into a debate about it. The decision's been made, but we do want to be helpful. So do keep all the notes, and do remember and make sure everyone knows everything is discoverable. So please don't write things that you would not like to see at an employment tribunal. And then we run an assessment centre. Now, this is what we do for when we're appointing careers advisors. I think it's probably more rigorous than many, and you will pick and choose what is relevant for you. But the aim is to have multiple ways to see the candidate in action, to put them at their ease. And in a way, I'm looking always for the unguarded comment, to really understand what people are like day to day. We tend to engage everybody if we can, to collect as much information as we can. And even if they're not directly involved, if we're doing an all-day event, maybe we've got 6 candidates, we would get a sandwich lunch in, and then the rest of the team can be around as well. So, excuse me. So the candidates are also getting a feel for the organization. It is a 2-way process after all. So the processes we use and that you could consider, the classic panel interview, 30 to 45 minutes. And that's the shortlisting committee, are the interview panel. And they would run through a number of standard questions, same questions for each person. But again, we're not 100% rigid. I would, during those interviews, I might break out and say, look, I've heard you say 2 or 3 times, or could I just probe you a bit more on your answer there? Which of course might not be relevant for every candidate. So we're trying to be equal by having the initial question the same for everybody, but you might probe a bit to understand. We run a team exercise. This is quite challenging. You put all the candidates together, so they know they're going to be at the session for much of the day. They sit around a table and they are being observed by probably your whole team sitting around the edge of the room. And we're wanting to see how people work together. And they might be given, you've got 20 minutes or you've got half an hour. And we've just been told that we have to go and do a presentation on this, and no one's available, or one person's available. What are we going to do? I've also used the example where we've said that the task for the team exercise is decide on a topic and reach a conclusion. And that, you know, that's incredibly vague. But again, we don't really care about the outcomes. We're caring about whether people work well together, whether they support each other, they bring other people into the discussion. They don't sulk, which we have seen, if their ideas aren't taken on. They stick to their ideas. So if they promote an idea which is really good and nobody hears them, they remember to bring it back a minute or two later when the time is better. So that's what we're looking for, is how well do they work together? We ask them to do a bit of a presentation. So we might say, you're going to give a 30-minute presentation, but actually we only want 5 minutes of it. So give us the beginning or the middle or the end. And it could be on a task that's relevant. You're going off to a college or a department to talk about networking or working with employers, or I don't know, something like that. Give us 5 minutes to see what you're like. Probably some version of written exercise, respond to emails, do an intro exercise. You'll have those, I suspect. And then another one we would do is an observed one-to-one meeting with a client. So we get a team student in and we watch the person and how they work with that student. And again, we're looking all the time for, are they consistent? So in the panel interview, there might have been a question about how do you work with students? And then we'll watch what actually happened in real life and say, well, hang on, that didn't match. And as I said, we might have a sandwich, well, we would have in the old days, a sandwich lunch for all the staff and candidates to meet each other and have those conversations. But of course, it's not informal, it's not relaxed, because everyone is trying to get to know what they're like and what they're listening for. Yeah, so that's the way we would run an assessment centre. Everyone's been through it, so that's always good. Everyone who works there, and it can be very thorough. Now, so then we come to the end of that day and we say, right, we gather our team together. We've said goodbye to all the candidates and we say, okay, team, first of all, we're looking for input from the team. You don't have a formal vote. The vote is by the shortlisting committee. It's just those 3 or 4, but we are looking for information. Different members of the team are probably looking after different exercises, so they can report back on each one. And we will score each candidate on a whiteboard for each exercise and see what the scores come up with. And we're particularly looking for people to say, you know, I heard X say this, and that was a real red flag, or it rang a bell. I just wondered, did anyone else hear that? Or what did other people think? What are the unguarded comments we're looking for? And as I said, we can cross-check answers, interview questions, what somebody said over lunch, or what they just said in the corridor as they went from one to another. And we have a number of examples of people who just gave out what they thought was a light-hearted comment, but just didn't ring true. And finally, and this is an idea that we borrowed from Sandhurst, which was 1 or 2 of the team members aren't given any of the paperwork. So they don't have a CV or cover letter or anything about the candidate. And we asked them what they thought first, so that they're not swayed by, oh, they went to this college, or they've got this experience, or they've done this or that. They're just seeing the person exactly as it is. Everybody else, of course, especially the shortlisting teams, have seen all the paperwork that's been delivered. But we do quite like this, where you've got people who are truly background blind and are able to say, well, I thought they came over as very warm, very affable, and all the rest of it. And we want their observations first. So we gather all that information, we put the scores on the doors, we weight them appropriately. You may weight different exercises at different levels. We tend not to, we just look at the total score. First question, of course, is anyone actually appointable? You should never feel pressured to appoint a weak candidate, even though you've got a vacancy that we've been desperate to fill. We've been through all this work, but as I think anyone with experience knows, it's 10 times the effort to make it fit, or then to let that person go, or say it doesn't work. So, you know, it's always better to say, actually, I wouldn't appoint any of them, but let's be really sure about that. And then we'll go around again in a few weeks. Next point is, on any one exercise, could anyone be ruled out? Even if they've got a good overall score, maybe there's a bad action, but, you know, are they understandable mistakes? Could they be learned? Could we teach them? In which case we'll live with that. We can understand that. Having reached a conclusion and said, okay, we all agree that X is a standout candidate, they're really good. Does everyone feel that's good? Anyone, and this is about our culture, which is very open. Does anyone feel that's the wrong decision? Do we need a second round? I mentioned that earlier, of the top 1 or 2 candidates. And pretty much, because that's the end of the day, then we would go home and sleep on the decision and wake up in the morning and then just check in again with the committee. Are we all still really sure of it? Because there's nothing like waking up early in the morning and think, you know what, there's just something about that cat, I'm just not sure. And then we might go around again or bring them back. So sleeping on decisions can be really valuable. And then phone them. Yeah, phone them, phone the successful candidate, offer the role. Of course, even a verbal offer is a formal contract. And in order to write the written contract, we need a start date and a pay level. The university, I give thanks every day that we have a graded set of public grades. So I know that this is a grade 5 job or a grade 8 job. You start at the beginning, you work your way up. There's a little bit of negotiation, but not very much is possible. Get their acceptance as an email, and then let the unsuccessful candidates know. And with the unsuccessful candidates, we try to give very specific feedback on what they can improve on. So you were strong on this. We all enjoyed meeting you. You were strong on the panel discussion, but in the team exercise, we thought it would have gone better if you had, you know, what would have been better, what they could improve on. When you give examples, think about using the STAR technique for giving examples of what went on. It's pretty rare, from what I understand, and it's greatly appreciated by candidates. It's helpful. Again, you're trying to demonstrate the culture, and you never know. I've appointed several people who didn't get through the first time. They go off, they get trained, they come back a year later, they apply again, they get the job. So you want to confirm what they think about your organization by your behavior all the way through the process. And then a nice warm note to all the staff, and copy in the appointee as well, that we're delighted to welcome XYZ to the organization starting in 2 months' time, sitting in this office, working on this area, just to make them feel warm, and off we go. Okay, so just recap. Remember, it's, do I want to work with them? That's all you're really trying to find out. They won't be in front of you if they don't have the technical skills. And again, you're probing responsibility, achievement, and are they nice to have around? Are they involved in teams? Do other people think they're nice? And other people could have done this through their sports teams or their drama clubs or their extracurricular or their volunteering. And if other people have done that, that's always a good sign. And remember, we're looking for all these, do we think they're honest and open and so on? So that's what we're trying, that's what we're there for. Keep that in mind. And that's what this process was about. A couple of links there. You've got the slides. Again, these are aimed at the student side of life or graduates or whatever, but types of interview and a bit more around assessment centres. And then I put in my email addresses there. So I think we probably have some time for any questions, and I'll stop sharing the screen. See if that works.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I can see we've had quite a few comments come through in the chat. So I'll perhaps start off with a question that's not in the chat, just as a helpful thing. So I often say, oh, my video's not on. Here we go. There we go. I've often kind of, when I've advertised posts in the past, gone back out in terms of looking at what is it that we can look for in terms of recruitment that is perhaps beyond the application form and beyond the interview itself. And I guess one of the things I always used to talk about was even asking some of my frontline staff, what were they like on the phone? Because again, part of the team fit was, was there anyone that was really rude to you on the phone that, starts to send some of those kind of, I guess, those red marks, I guess, in the sense that we're trying to think about. So I always think it's useful. And obviously social media gives us opportunities. Is it useful, do you think, to look at things like LinkedIn and Facebook accounts of potential applicants coming forward?
If you've got the time, of course it is. We were talking about this last night, actually, the whole social media stuff, their Facebook posts, because they are going to be effectively an ambassador for your organization. And if there are endless pictures of them drunk at parties and all the rest, that might not be super ideal. It's not as extreme as this story, which is I entertained and met my opposite number from Yale University a few years ago. And he said he'd been at a careers fair, he had his stand, and he noticed 2 stands away were all these guys in dark suits, white shirts and thin black ties and like mirror sunglasses. And he thought, CIA, okay. So he walked over to the CIA stand who are recruiting and said, look, is it true that you look at people's Facebook posts before you recruit them? And they said, oh yeah, but we always start with the deleted items. Now, they're able to see the deleted items, but even so, I think, yeah, I think you should. I think it's worth a look. We tend not to, maybe but maybe we should. But I haven't. I mean, you've got to make sure you know what you're going to do with it if you do go and look.
I think that's a really valuable point, because I guess, we're all entitled to a life outside of work, I guess, as well. So you kind of, for me, it's that kind of trigger is, for me, it should only ever be, is there anything that's coming up in their kind of personal accounts? If they haven't locked them, I mean, I would advise any candidate, if you go for a job, to certainly lock your personal social media accounts if you share with friends stuff that isn't appropriate in a work context. But again, for me, it's kind of, particularly if you're looking for people that talk about being reliable, are the hints that they're not, like you say, they're out every night during the week till 3 in the morning. They're probably not going to be at work for 9. Although I guess when we were younger, we all survived on less sleep, if the truth be known. But, for me, it's picking up other comments in that could be potentially the racist remarks that come back to bite people. And we see that in a lot of professions as they move forward. So I think it's those kind of triggers that are the ones that are perhaps the most important if you are looking.
Exactly. And well, again, I'll give you an example. We were doing one of these interviews. We had assessment centres, and we took one of the candidates towards to go up the corridor to go and to do the one-to-one with the student. And as we went in, or on the way, my colleague said to him, oh, by the way, she's hurt her hand, so she's not shaking hands, so just so you know that. And he said, oh, great, good. I thought for a minute you were going to say she was really disabled. And we thought, what? It's like, I think we can stop now. But you think, you thought that was funny, I suppose, but for goodness sake. And your point about reception, I mean, again, you would tell any candidate you are on show from the moment the building comes in sight. And because, you know, you can't be nice. It's like being nasty to waiters or something, for goodness sake.
Absolutely. Oh, from the moment you actually request an application form,
yes,
you know, yeah. I used to go right back to that point in terms of asking my admin staff, was there anyone that, you know, was really rude to you during that process, because you need someone in a team, and you certainly don't want to end up recruiting someone that on the day you announce who you've appointed, everyone else in the office already goes, oh, they've given the job to them, you know. So it's really important to get that sense, I think, a little bit.
Okay.
I wanted to just come back to a point just in terms of, you talk a lot about obviously it needing to be someone that you enjoy working with. And I think that's right. We spend a lot of time at work and we need to build that team rapport. How do we balance that against obviously ensuring we have a diverse workforce? Lots of our community organisations, you know, trying to represent their community. So how do we make sure that we get a team that we enjoy working with, but we don't always just recruit type? Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. Again, I went for an interview many years ago with a well-known organisation, and everybody I met was the same. They were all sort of mid-30s white males, and I came away thinking, this is a very sterile environment. So you're quite right. I mean, that's why I think you, first of all, you have a diverse panel who will pick up different things, and you get everybody in the team involved, so that, and we're open to people saying, no, come on, you're being a bit harsh on them now. Like that's not fair, what you just said. Okay, fair enough. Also, we are open. We like challenge. We like people saying, no, I don't agree with that. I mean, we want that. We want a bit of debate. Otherwise, you know, we're not going to get any, well, you know, grit in the oyster, are we, to move the thing forward? So we do like that. I think it starts before that as well. It's a bit about how we're going to attract the broadest group of people that they'll feel able to want to work here. And that's around language. And that's again where I would be looking to colleagues, maybe from a wider range, to say, how would you feel about this language? Have I inadvertently, complete unconscious bias here, put in something that would not go down well? You know, I'm not doing it deliberately. I just don't know, and that's fine. We've all had you know, unconscious bias training, for example, about being aware of what we're doing. Even, I mean, recently I was involved in a different sort of appointment where we went through the rigorous scoring, and we had I think it was like an all-male list, and we said, we can't do that. That is not going to work. Let's keep going down the list. We've got to have a more diverse delivery, you know, group. We just can't. I don't care what the scores say here. And maybe we've all scored, in this case, perhaps it was the women, we've scored them lower just for whatever reason. I mean, so.
It is interesting, because I think it's a key challenge, and I know certainly in the social enterprise sector, we would certainly say we need to do much more in terms of looking at diversity in our workforce. Yeah. So I think we have to really consider that as we move forwards. And like you say, it starts again right from looking at your job pack, how you recruit, where you're advertising, are you appealing to the right candidates, and really understanding your organisational culture as well. I think if you're a culture where everyone goes to the pub on a Friday, you know, that's not going to necessarily attract everybody into your team. So there's kind of a balance, I think, again, in terms of understanding that. I'm going to come to a few of the questions in the chat, because we've had quite a lot of engagement. So perhaps a very practical one, first of all, and it comes back, you made obviously the point, and I guess GDPR and lots of rules around ability to request information. You talked a bit about being careful about what you write down. How much can candidates ask for in advance? I think one lady was saying sometimes she just almost records kind of what people were wearing so that she can recall exactly who they were at the point when you do selection. So how much should people note? And is it that a candidate can actually ask for information of everything you've written down?
I think you've got to assume they can ask for everything. So if you've written down and you haven't been consistent, you know, the worst case is and this must be extremely rare that people want to do it, but the worst case is it's either social media or the news headline on the Daily Mail or an employment tribunal. They said, when you wrote down "wears red sweater," you know, which is a completely objective statement, what did you really mean by that? And what, and you know, you don't want to be there defending that. You just, it's like why we don't ask for photographs on CVs and so on, because again, you might say, oh, I don't like blonde people or something. You know, I know it's tedious, but it's defensive, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
well, maybe it's more than defensive. Maybe it is actually being treating people truly equally, and it doesn't really matter what they're wearing or what have you. Of course, we know it does matter what people wear when they walk for that first impression, but there's a wide range of what people can wear that is still acceptable. And of course, what's acceptable to you is going to be different to me. Although I hope, again, pandemic-wise and Zoom-wise and all the rest, that the threshold has dropped a lot.
Absolutely, and again, it will vary depending on the type of role that you're recruiting for as well. What expectations I think you have of people around some of that. So it's difficult, isn't it, to say it doesn't matter at all. For some jobs, presentation will be more important than for others. So it's a tough one, I think. But
it is. Yes, I see Patricia wrote, "Lady with yellow hand knitted jumper." Well, yeah, I mean, the 99.9% chance nothing's going to happen is just, you know, unless you wrote that down for everybody, and in which case, why did you need that? Yeah, because again, that's why at the team at the end you're saying, which person was that? Especially if you've seen 6 or 7 of them. Which one was it? Did we see them first? Oh crikey, I can't remember what they look. I wish I'd had a photograph.
I love that Patricia's just put in a comment that they teach sewing, so they're very excited by the idea of a hand knitted yellow jumper. So that's you know, but again, that's that fit, isn't it? That's someone coming in saying, I do all this stuff, and they're coming in because they're wearing their own clothes. That's, you know, it's proof, isn't it? So it's, again, it's that comment that it's very dependent on a particular job sometimes.
It'll be on their cover letter, I hope, that they were a finalist in Great British Sewing Bee or something.
Oh, I love that programme.
What a great show that
was. Perhaps just, again, another practical one. Obviously, you talked a lot, and we're here on Zoom, I guess, today. So during COVID, quite a lot has gone on to Zoom in terms of, or Meet or Microsoft Teams and various things in terms of interviews. Are there any tips that you might have for conducting Zoom interviews for people? It's such a hard medium, I think, sometimes for the interview.
It is, although we did do, where are we? What is it? It's September, August. Right. So back in January, we did do just this with all on Teams and they did a team exercise together, and we observed, and the candidates did that, and we did. I mean, some things you can't do. We did the panel interviews, and I think people have got a lot better. Well, we've appointed a great candidate. Normally we would have had a dinner with them or a lunch or something, so obviously we couldn't have that. So we missed that social bit of it, but we got enough, I think. I actually don't think it's terribly different, and indeed, as we know, for students, many first round interviews are being done digitally these days. It does mean you don't have to schlep to London or Glasgow or something for your first round interview, but it's people, and the great thing is people have got phones that they can practice. So I would definitely stress to candidates to practice with it and be rigorous, and ideally somebody else watches them and say, we don't come across as very engaged, do you? You're not really, smiling or looking at the camera or any of that sort of stuff. So I think, I'm not sure it's actually that different. I mean, obviously there are exercises you can't do. But
sure, and like you say, I think face to face, people have it's difficult, isn't it, when some people will have a different level of nerves to another candidate, and how do you look beyond nerves to answers? And that's always quite tough, regardless of the medium, I think.
It is tough, which is why I think multiple different ways of doing things, having them there all day. But yes, again, it's not an interrogation by the secret police. We are actually, I mean, the best interviews are where you put people at their ease for a good 5 minutes at the beginning, and you warmly, and you get a bit of humor going, and we're truly trying to get to know people. After all, we don't want to waste our time any more than they do. We really don't. And everybody on this call has interviewed, and you know, here we go again. Here's candidate number 4. How's the next 45 minutes of my life going to be? Is it, I mean, I just pray, I mean, what you're trying to tell candidate is the panel is praying that the next person through the door is the one. And we all, I don't know how you work, but we all, I mean, we all, I think, can't help thin slicing our initial thoughts within a minute of saying no or yes. And then we spend, I hope, 20 minutes, half an hour checking what we thought and saying, actually, no, I was wrong. This person's really good. They've calmed down. It's relaxed. It's okay now. This is better. I made a mistake. That's why you have a long interview. The other reason to have at least 30 minutes, if not 45, a very non-PC term. I had an HR woman I worked with who said, you know, mad people can't keep it together for more than half an hour. So that's why you need a bit longer than that to see, is it consistent? Are they being open and transparent all the way through? So they can't keep it up.
And equally, some people, it takes a while to get into their stride, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, you know, the comment that you made, you know, I've always thought that interviews are very much a two-way process. So particularly at the point when you're recruiting people to come and work for you, they're looking as much about whether they want to work for you as whether you want them to be one of your employees. So, you know, it's very much a sales pitch from both sides, I think, in terms of how you come across.
It certainly is. And certainly by the end of it, when you get to the, have you got any questions for us? Then you might, at that point, instinctively as a group, go into sales mode of thinking, this is a great candidate. We need to warm them up. We need now to say why it's a great place to work. This is our chance. So hopefully if they ask you a question or two, one can then go into, move from buying to selling.
Yeah, so I'm conscious we've got kind of 10 minutes and there's a couple of questions, that one in the Q&A and one just early on in the chat that we haven't come to. So one's perhaps just much broader, perhaps stepping away from employment a little bit, about how someone acquires more strategic management skills. I guess that's part of selling your own organisation and requiring skills. I mean, certainly I know here in Scotland, there's lots of training people can go on around management development courses. And for social enterprises, there's a lot of that that's free. So I would say to that person, very much, if you want to ask any questions, you know, Social Enterprise Scotland can guide you towards some of those free leadership courses and management skill courses as well. And the university would, of course, have some of those, I'm sure, on offer for students.
Yes, and indeed we're looking at, with a Skylark hat on now, we are looking at creating a sort of graduate training year, which would combine a formal, you know, sort of leadership qualification that might come through ILM, for example, with the experiences of working in teams in different charities and social enterprises. So you might go and do a 4-week piece of work with this group on their customer management systems or whatever, or you might do a 6-week piece of work on their strategy, or 3 weeks. I mean, so that combined with a core leadership training as a 1-year sort of graduate program, partly to, if you go all the way back to the beginning that I talked about, that students are increasingly saying, I want to do something that is worthwhile, that serves the greater good. Well, so that means we need to provide formal training and opportunities to meet lots of different social enterprises and to work in them day to day, that competes with, I don't know, going to Accenture or going to BAE Systems, or those sort of other those other graduate training programs that are out there, to put this sector, if you want to call it a sector, onto the same level as these others, that this is a great place for professional routes. You can do well at this, because again, students get what influences them? Their teachers, their peers, their parents, their families. What are you off to do? I'm going to go work for a charity. No, I'm going on this, graduate program. Compared with that, I mean, we have had students who say, Rolls-Royce, no, I don't want to work for them. Thinking, what? Okay, so they are very swayed by peer pressure. And if we can provide a way to say, no, this is a professional way in, actually, and you can have a great influence in something that, remember, you're on the moral high ground of working with something really worthwhile. So that's what we're working on at the moment, in terms of getting funding for it and developing the program. We have all the building blocks we need.
No, it's really interesting. I mean, one of the comments, and I'll close with the last couple of questions, but one of the comments I wrote as you were talking, I know obviously lots of our social enterprises are often smaller organisations than your kind of very typical Accentures or your graduate kind of recruitments. But actually, what I think, again, we need to think about what we can tell our people that are coming in is, albeit we're small organisations, and there may not be the opportunity for growth within that organisation in terms of stepping up, because there aren't that many levels of jobs and careers, but actually what you get in very small organisations is a real chance to taste doing lots of different types of activities and roles and functions and tasks. So again, I think for me, it's how do we position our organisations to say, well, we know you might not be with us for more than 2 or 3 years, but during that time, you'll get the chance to try a little bit of marketing, a little bit of operations management, a little bit of strategic thinking. So you get a real chance to be involved with much more than just a very focused approach.
Well, a couple of comments there. They're not going to be with any organisation more than 2 or 3 years. We know that. When we've, again, about, 10 years ago or something, I surveyed alumni. We got about 40,000 responses and worked out, and this was 10 years ago, that they had, the average was 3 different employers in the first 10 years. And that was 10 years ago. And that was a group of people about 45. So I suspect it's like 4 or maybe 5. So they're going to move around, whatever. It's not just going to be unique to the social enterprise sector. Secondly, it's like joining a startup. A small organization is, yes, we might move you around, but actually it's up to you as well to say, you know what, I'd really like to can I just volunteer and have a go? I'll stay late, I'll do this stuff. That's what you would do in let's say a technology startup, is one moment you'd be on the stand selling the organization, the next you'd be back at the home office doing all the Facebook posts, and then you'd be packing boxes up and shipping them out. You throw yourself into it and magic will happen. And you'll be able to say, look, I got all this responsibility, I developed these things. And actually, I said to the boss, can we do this program? And they said, yes, I had a go. So I piloted something. So I think that's how I'd be selling that sector. The great thing about small organizations is you have that opportunity to do as much or as little as you want. I mean, if you don't volunteer for all that stuff, well, you'll have a fairly mundane career, and maybe that's fine. But there is the chance always to grow into something bigger. And also to move between sectors. So you social enterprise one time, and then you might go, I don't know, go into teaching, and then you might come back, and then you might go to become, whatever. So
yeah, I think we're seeing people, I mean, people are having to work longer. So people are definitely moving around a lot more than I think they ever used to. And I'm really encouraged by Bev's comment just in the chat about we should be really proud that we help people move on to a next job. That's an achievement, I think, to help people be successful. So I think, that's something we should really celebrate, not just kind of go, oh gosh, we've got to recruit someone else to replace them now. Be really pleased that someone's had a positive experience with you, because that's part of what you can sell to the next candidate.
I mentioned that my administrator, Alice, is moving to Edinburgh. It's great for her. She's only been with us a couple of years. It's great for her. And actually it's great for us because we have the opportunity always to rethink the job and to say, actually, you know what, why don't we add this to it or take that away from it or move things around? It's always, that's a wonderful chance. And we're going to get new blood in, which is always good. So yes, I agree. Early in my career, I used to think, oh, what you just said, oh no, you know, but actually I see it all as positive. Yes, you've got to go through a bit of, you know, stuff, but you'll meet lots of people. That's the other thing.
Absolutely. That's all part of building the network, isn't it? Which is incredibly useful. So two just last quick, hopefully quick questions. So one is, someone asked, what would you recommend as a kind of useful length for a probationary period? So hopefully that's quite a quick question.
It's kind of 3 to 6 months, isn't it? I mean, remember, probation works both ways, doesn't it? Well, it's kind of, but yeah, it's probably 3 to 6, depending on the organization. When I joined my current job, I had a 2-year probation, which is just bloody ridiculous. And I think is illegal. But anyway, it's yeah, no more than 6. I mean, I'm not even sure how useful probation periods are, because I think if you have to get rid of them, you have to get rid of them. It's going to be hard, whether it's on probation or not. What you want is regular management check-ins to just, is it a tap on the tiller to change direction, or is it we've got a bit of an issue here? So
absolutely, are the problems that can be fixed with a little bit of skills, training a mentor, a bit of a buddy up.
What you don't want is, right, see you in 6 months then. It's the stuff in the corridor, it's the how things going at the end of each assignment, what's going on. But that now we're into sort of management rather than the absolutely.
And then perhaps just the last question, because I think Duncan was telling me we were due to finish at 12:15, but I thought it was 12:30, so I've carried on, and there were lots of good questions, so I hope that's been okay, Jonathan. Someone's asked a very particular one just in terms of I guess almost training for the interview panel. So and it's in the Q&A, just in terms of, do you give training to your interview panel, particularly on working alongside applicants or bringing in applicants that might have particular abilities that you need to, I guess, take into account at interview stage?
Yes, actually, well, within the university, the chair of every panel has to have gone through the training every 5 years on how to chair a panel properly and all the, I mean, I think it's about 3 or 4 hours of that sort of stuff. As I said, everyone's had unconscious bias training. We haven't had much turnover recently, but before that, I think once you're recruiting with the same group of people and you have a conversation beforehand, it gets a lot easier, especially as you start to learn what people's, you know, unspoken messages are about. Do they lean forwards when they like the person? Do they put their pen down when they don't? All that sort of soft stuff. But again, I think the training is the rigorous looking at what are we going to put these people through. Let's have a look at all the questions. Are they balanced? Are they fair? Can they all answer those? Yeah. So
thank you.
The training.
Yeah, no, and like you say, I think when you're used to interviewing with people, actually, you've got a rapport on the panel, which is helpful, and you tend to know what other people on the panel are going to pick up on in terms of questions as well, which can be helpful in terms of that digging deeper side, I think, at times. So,
well, and also if you're chairing it properly, you'll invite the rest of the panel. Does anyone else want to follow up anything there? Okay, let's move on to the next question. And we tend to move the questions around the team, so you'll ask the next one, and then. But we all feel able to follow up. Or as technique I did see someone use, which I occasionally copy, is they'll have a bit of scrap paper and they'll say, you know, you've said that word, whatever it was, you know, consolidation or something, or challenge 3 times. Can you just expand on that a bit, please, about what I've just picked up something there, because now is your chance to pick that up, not later.
Absolutely. I mean, don't be afraid. I think this is the one. But in my early days of interviewing, I was very conscious of following a very set formula with everyone. And occasionally I learned that meant that there was sometimes someone would have left the room and there was a burning question I wanted to ask, but hadn't, because I hadn't asked that to anybody else. So if there's a burning question, there's no point not asking it, because you'll end up discounting someone because you don't know the answer. So I think always make sure that you ask what you need while the candidate's in front of you to enable you to make the best decision.
Keeping the questions work related. you know, I hope the days are long gone about, oh, I see you're, you know, you're a young unmarried woman and blah, blah, blah. You can imagine what comes next, and all did used to come, and it's outrageous. You also, I remember being told, you know, okay, this person looks overqualified for the job, and that might generate a question about motivation, but it might also, I tend not to, because I think, well, I'm going to treat this person as an adult. I assume they know what they're applying for. They know what the salary is. Let's just take it from there. They've got their own reasons and decisions and what have you that they've made. What's in front of us? This person, this job.
Absolutely.
So,
do you know, we've had some great comment in the chat. People have found the session incredibly useful, Jonathan. So I'd like to say thank you to all of those kind of bits of tips and advice. I think we don't always, particularly in small organisations, we're not doing recruitment always that frequently. So it's really helpful to get those refreshers, to understand how other people do things, and to really get those bits of tips and advice in terms of looking at recruiting new people to our team. So I'd like to say a big thank you to yourself and to Katie. Katie, I know, has been monitoring bits of the chat as well. So thank you both for joining us today. It was great to have you on the session. We will be sharing the recording once we've had the chance, let's be honest, to just edit me off the start and the end. So thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day, everyone. We're not here next Wednesday. It's the CEIS Policy and Practice Conference. So if you're going to be at that, we will see you there. And otherwise, we will be back with our usual Wednesday webinars the week after. Thank you very much. Have a great day.